When the Second World War ended, the United States had lost 52 submarines during the war, most of them in the Pacific, and most were never found. They were gone, somewhere under thousands of feet of water, with their crews still aboard. One of the 52 was the Harder, the deadliest destroyer killer of the war, sunk off the Philippines in August 1944 with all 79 men. For 8 decades she stayed missing, a name on a list, until a privately funded expedition went looking for what the Navy had written off. What they found, sitting upright in the dark, is the rest of this story. So let me take you back to the beginning, because the Harder did not earn that reputation by accident. She was a Gato-class fleet submarine, built at Groton, Connecticut, and put into service in December of 1942, less than a year after Pearl Harbor. And here is the part that makes her different from almost every other boat in the fleet. From the day she was commissioned to the day she went down, she had exactly one captain. His name was Samuel Dealey, and everybody just called him Sam. Now, when you imagine the man who ran the most feared submarine in the Pacific, you probably picture some natural-born killer, top of his class, marked for greatness from the start. Dealey was not that. He grew up in Dallas, lost his father when he was small, and when he finally got into the Naval Academy, he nearly washed straight back out. His grades collapsed in his first year and they bounced him. He had to reapply, come back and start over from scratch, and when he finally graduated, he landed dead in the middle of his class. Nothing on paper said legend, and honestly, that is the part I find most interesting about him. Because the thing that made him dangerous later was not talent, it was nerve. There is one more strange little thread in his background worth knowing. His uncle was George Dealey, the publisher of the Dallas Morning News, the family the city named Dealey Plaza after. So the name was already carved into Texas before Sam ever did anything. He just went and did the opposite of what you would expect from a kid born into a known name. He picked the most dangerous job in the Navy, took a boat full of men into the worst water in the Pacific, and made a career out of doing the one thing the manual told him never to do. To understand what that nerve looked like, you have to understand the one move that made his name. A submarine in 1944 was, for the most part, a careful animal. When a destroyer came hunting, you went deep, you went quiet, and you prayed the man on the sonar above you lost the scent. The destroyer was the predator. The submarine was the thing being chased. Dealey decided he was tired of being the thing being chased. His signature tactic was to do the exact opposite of what every instinct screamed at him to do. And I have to be honest, the first time I read how it actually worked, I assumed someone had embellished it. When an enemy destroyer turned and charged straight at his boat, Dealey would not run. He would point the bow directly at it, line the submarine up nose to nose with a warship coming at full speed, and fire his torpedoes straight down its throat. Then he would dive and go silent. They called it the down-the-throat shot, and it was so reckless that he needed explicit permission from the Pacific Fleet Command to keep doing it. Most skippers would sooner have surfaced and surrendered than deliberately invite a destroyer to close the range on them. Dealey treated it like a doorway. The crew gave the boat a motto that fit the man perfectly: hit 'em harder. For a year and a half, it worked. Patrol after patrol, the Harder came home, and Dealey kept doing the unthinkable and kept getting away with it. And I want to be clear that he was not just a killer, because there is a story from the spring of 1944 that tells you who he actually was. On the 1st of April, off an island called WWII, an American pilot went down in the water under enemy fire. Dealey took the Harder in close to shore, in range of the guns, and pulled the man out of the sea. A couple of weeks later, on the same patrol, he sank a Japanese destroyer outright. That is the whole man in one patrol. He would risk the boat to save one stranger, and he would risk it again to put a warship on the bottom. The recklessness ran both directions. But the patrol that turned him from a good captain into a name the Japanese Navy genuinely feared was the fifth one, in June of 1944, off a place called Tawi-Tawi. Here is the situation. The Japanese had an oil problem, so they parked their main battle fleet at an anchorage near the Borneo oil fields. Carriers, cruisers, that enormous battleship Musashi, the lot of it, all gathered in one harbor getting ready for the big fight everyone knew was coming. And the Harder was sent right into the mouth of it to watch the front door and make trouble. What followed was 4 days that almost do not sound real. On the 6th of June, Dealey was caught in the moonlight trying to line up on a tanker when a destroyer spotted him and charged. He swung the boat, fired 3 torpedoes, and the destroyer was gone inside 5 minutes. The next day, the 7th, he did it again, except this time he let the target get close. 650 yards, which in naval terms is practically point blank. All 3 torpedoes hit, and the destroyer blew up almost directly over the Harder. The crew felt the wreckage raining down on the hull above their heads, and then a sister ship arrived and held them down and depth charged them for 2 solid hours. That sentence is easy to read straight past, so let me slow down on it, because to me it is one of the worst things a person can be asked to endure. 2 hours of sitting in a steel tube several hundred feet down, in the dark, sweating, listening to the propellers of the ship that is trying to kill you pass overhead, again and again, and waiting for the one charge that lands close enough to split the hull. They did not fire back. They could not. They just had to take it and stay silent and hope. They survived that, and the day after, the 8th, Dealey slipped undetected into the narrowest part of the passage, found 2 more destroyers and fired into the overlap. Another one gone, boilers erupting as she went under. And I have to be straight with you here, because the records do not actually agree on the number. Harder is usually credited with 5 destroyers in 4 days, but only 4 are confirmed. At least 1 more was damaged, or claimed and never confirmed. So I am not going to hand you a clean number that the sources themselves argue about. The point is not the count. The point is what it did to the men on the other side, because the real damage was not the destroyers at all. Before I get to that, this is the kind of moment where it is worth saying out loud what you are watching. 1 submarine, 1 captain who barely scraped through Annapolis, sat in a passage and methodically dismantled the screen, protecting an entire fleet. If you take one thing from this story, it is what happened next, because it is the part the history books tend to rush past. The Japanese command started getting reports. Submarine here, submarine there, ships under attack, escorts blowing up. And from all of that noise, Admiral Suemu Toyoda came to a conclusion that was completely wrong and yet completely understandable. He decided that Tawi-Tawi was surrounded by submarines, a wolf pack, a trap closing around his fleet. In reality, a huge share of the chaos was coming from 1 boat, but the belief was enough. Admiral Ozawa, who commanded the mobile fleet, weighed anchor and left the anchorage a full day ahead of schedule, partly to get out from under what he thought was a submarine net. That premature departure threw off Japanese timing going into the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the enormous carrier clash that Americans would later nickname the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, because of how lopsided it became. 1 submarine spooked an entire battle fleet out of its own harbor, That is the kind of thing I would call exaggeration if it were in a movie. It is in the patrol records. For that fifth patrol, the Navy gave Sam Dealey the Medal of Honor, and here is the detail that I cannot get past, the one that hangs over everything that comes after. By the time that medal was actually placed into a pair of hands, the man it was meant for was already dead. It was handed to his widow, because the sixth patrol was the one he did not come back from. The Harder left Fremantle, Australia, in August of 1944, hunting alongside two other submarines, the Hague and the Haddo. By this stage of the war, American subs hunted in coordinated packs, and right to the very end, the Harder was still doing what it did best. Just 2 days before the end, on the 22nd of August, she sank two Japanese escort frigates off Bataan. Still aggressive, still hunting. Nothing about her behavior suggested a boat about to die. Then came the morning of the 24th. The Haddo had peeled off to reload torpedoes, leaving the Harder and the Hague working a stretch of water off Cayman Point, near Darsal Bay on the coast of Luzon. Before dawn, the Hague was lining up her own attack when she sighted the Harder's periscope, 600 or 700 yards dead ahead. Off to the side, about 2,000 yards out, sat a small Japanese escort vessel, one of the little ships the Japanese had built, specifically to hunt submarines. What happened next we know from both sides, which is rare, and the two accounts together are almost unbearable. Dealey set up the move that had made him famous. He fired 3 torpedoes at that escort, a down-the-throat shot. The same play that had worked over and over. This time, all 3 missed. 2 slid past the escort on one side, 1 passed on the other. And now, the most dangerous captain in the Pacific had emptied his shot at a warship that was fully awake, fully alert, and very close. I keep coming back to that miss, because the move that built the entire legend is the move that finally killed him. The Japanese escort turned and began dropping depth charges, and her crew did something deliberate. They set each charge to go off a little deeper than the one before, walking the explosions down through the water column, searching. On the Harker, a few hundred yards away, the crew listened. They counted roughly 15 rapid depth charges, and then nothing. The 5th salvo had found her. When the Hague came up to periscope depth and swept the area, she did not find the Harder. She found a ring of Japanese marker buoys laid out in a circle about half a mile across. The Japanese had already marked the spot. They knew they had killed something down there. The Harder, with all 79 men aboard, including Sam Dealey, was on the bottom. The Navy did not declare her lost until January of 1945, which is its own quiet kind of cruelty. All those months of families not knowing. And then she became what so many of these boats became, a name on a casualty list, a war grave with no marked location, one of the 52 American submarines lost across the entire Second World War, most of them in the Pacific. Her own position known only as somewhere off the Philippines, underwater far too deep for anyone in 1945 to reach. And that is where the story sat for 80 years. Among the most decorated submarine commanders of the war, lost at the absolute peak of what he could do, and nobody could point to a spot on a chart and say, there, that is where they are. What changed it was not the Navy, it was a private effort. A man named Tim Taylor runs something called the Lost 52 Project, and the name tells you the mission. 52 missing submarines. Find them. Using autonomous underwater vehicles, remote-operated robots, sonar, and a technique called 4-dimensional photogrammetry, which basically means stitching thousands of images into a precise 3-dimensional model. His team went looking off Luzon for a boat that had been missing since before most of the world was born. In May of 2024, they found her. More than 3,000 feet down, roughly half a mile beneath the surface, the Harder was sitting upright on her keel. Not collapsed, not scattered across the seabed in pieces, not buried. Upright, the way she sailed, remarkably intact, except for one thing. There was a large wound in the hull, aft of the conning tower, the exact place where that final depth charge had struck. The boat was, in a sense, still telling you exactly how she died 80 years later in the dark, holding her shape. The team scanned the entire hull and built that full model of her, and the Naval History and Heritage Command confirmed it. This was the Harder. And the thing I keep coming back to is how little had to change for them to recognize her. The buoys the Japanese laid in 1944 had marked roughly where she fell. The damage matched the records exactly. The boat had been waiting, more or less in place, the whole time. We were just never able to look that deep until now. The Navy designated the wreck a protected war grave, the final resting place, in their words, of sailors who gave their life in defense of the nation. And the director of the Naval History and Heritage Command, Rear Admiral Samuel Cox, said something about the find that I think is the truest line in this whole story. Harder was lost in the course of victory, he said. We must not forget that victory has a price, as does freedom. That is what gets me about this one. We tend to remember the men who won and came home to be photographed. Sam Dealey won, and won bigger than almost anyone, and he never came home at all. The medal arrived without him. His boat scared a fleet out of a harbor and then disappeared into water nobody could reach for the better part of a century. And the only reason we can now stand over him, in a manner of speaking, and call it a grave instead of a guess, is that a small group of people refused to leave 52 crews lost forever just because the water was deep. There are 51 more out there. Boats with names and crews and families who still do not have a spot on a map. So the next time I want to take you down to another one of them, because every one of these wrecks is a story somebody assumed was over. It is right here waiting the same way the Harder waited. 80 years is a long time to stay lost. It turns out, it is not forever.